Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the demons face their demons and avenge their gather-round embarrassment, turning a 45-point loss into a 45-point win. Our honour has been restored. Joining me tonight to dissect a very forgettable win is George. Good evening, George.
Forgettable win, geez. We'll take the win, and isn't it great though to be at this point in the season, 9 wins under our belt? A bit unexpected for a lot of people, including myself, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the good thing is there will be no Bombers flying up to win the premiership flag this year, given their performances of lately. And it's even better when you look at the ladder, when we've got Collingwood, Carlton, Richmond and Essendon all at the 13th spot or below. So, it doesn't get much better than this.
Absolutely brilliant time to be alive. Also joining us tonight to break down all those stats from the match is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. Sorry, how did you describe the game just then?
It was a bit an unforgettable win. I've already forgotten.
Unforgettable win.
I'm getting greedy like the old days.
Well, look, I've seen way too many losses over the journey for any game, 40,000 plus. Absolutely unforgettable. Although it was a funny atmosphere there, I thought. There was a funny vibe. I don't know whether you guys felt it. Like the crowd was really subdued. Maybe it was at the end of, a big 2 weeks for the fans, for the club with Neil Danaher. I don't know.
There was a question about that. I didn't include it in the questions, but maybe I'll read it now just quickly so you're going to talk about it. Who was it? Sorry. Terrible of me to... I can't even find it. Way to kill the flow, Andy.
But it was quite a subdued atmosphere. But I mean, it's also partly.
Sorry. Hi, boy. This is from Raskability. I was at the game on Saturday, and it struck me at how quiet the D's fans were, and I feel a bit conflicted by it. I don't want to be like feral cats or Pies fans, but the umps are easily swayed by boisterous crowds. Just ask Dimmer. What do you guys think? Is it okay to be gracious? Is it okay to be gracious observers, or should we be more vocal and try to get our boys some more frees? I also wonder why, if the early time slot with family friendly has created a more passive and sober environment. So sorry about that. It was the first question. That's why I couldn't find it.
Well, my take was that, there was just, a lot going on in the last couple of weeks with Neil Danaher's passing and the emotion. And again, everyone's sort of saying it, even the media now, how much they enjoy listening to King. And I love how he leans into that stuff. Like he embraces that difficulty. And I've heard him raise multiple times the psychological challenge the team had with dealing with Brodie Myercheck's injury and the fallout from that. And rather than going old school tough guy, palaver, he leans into that and names it. And so I feel like that was probably a factor just the last couple of weeks with Neil Danaher. It was celebrating Neil Danaher again. And so it began with the two teams being in, having the rev up by, I think it was Simon Madden, and Flash, and then the sort of valet stuff for Neil before the game. But also there's the thing is, right from the get-go, we looked like we were going to win the game and never did from that point on. So there wasn't, there was one tiny bit where they got within 3 goals where I felt probably like every Demon fan, that little flicker.
I was nervous.
Feeling, but really that was it. And so there was no stress and there was no angst.
No stress, no angst.
Well, it really wasn't. In my preview of the pod last week, I said that I was a bit sort of surprised at myself for not knowing how poor Essendon's injury list is. It was a shocker. They had 16 injury list of 16 coming into this game, and I went through them on the pod last week on the preview pod. At least 9 of them, or at least 7 or 8 are in their best 23, and at least 4 or 5 are in their best, I would say, 10 players, and two or three of them in their top 5 players. So, it was, I actually going to, when I do the preview pod, I really underestimated us. I mean, I think I've got MFCSS from you. Is it somehow catchy or something?
Contact high.
Yeah. It was a classic game where a really good team, or a team that's up and about, against a team that's got nothing to play for now. That's what I said on the preview pod. What are they going to do? Like, in a way, the best thing that could happen for Essendon is to finish bottom of the ladder and get the number 1 draft pick. So they've got all of those things running around. That feeds into that game. But mainly, and I'll talk about this because I really think that this was our strategy, is we came in to smash them and we got on top and we never looked like losing the game, and we controlled it. So for me, that was probably the major factor in that sort of funky vibe. But not forgettable at all. Like, geez, Bombers, the amount of pain they've inflicted us over the years is, or maybe not quite so much the last few years, but geez, I've got a long memory when it comes to.
Well, they actually have. They beat us last year. They beat us earlier in the year. Remember that game? Remember the game when they lost all their players from the drug thing, and they had three listed players and beat us. They've had some surprise win. That win where they came from being 48 points in front, they've inflicted a lot of pain on me over the years.
But in this game, I had the feeling that the game was over in the first 3 minutes, basically. It's pretty obvious they haven't got much to put onto the ground in the first place. But when Max is kicking goals from the pocket around the corner, and I think we had 4 goals up in the first 3 minutes. You almost feel sad and sorry for them. They're not even up to the level of barely the competition. So it was a one-way street.
And George, what I felt with that was like, and this is not like being facetious, is I recognise that malaise. I barracked for Melbourne through the 70s and the 80s. I remember 87 was like the second coming of, it was manna from heaven for 87, because we had been in exactly that position that Essendon are in now for a decade and a half, or ever since I followed footy. And I recognise, I remember that year, even in the 2000s, when Beta, who I liked as a footballer, but he was in our top 5 or something for the Bluey, and that said a fair bit about where our list was at then. But back in the early 80s and mid 80s and late 70s, we were in that situation all the time.
Early 2010s, 2012, exactly. Before Bruce came, we were bottom of the barrel. That was another Essendon game where they absolutely destroyed us, 145 points.
And it looked like you could see just watching it too, like their structures were all over the place. They didn't know where they would go. Like, the whole difference between the two teams was a chasm. So, that was a big factor in the game. But unforgettable, absolutely not, because, for two things is, and I'll talk about it, it is remarkable. We just saw 2 of the best games of footy. Like that game from Max Gawn was unbelievable. I'm going to dig into it a bit. But it was just unbelievable, and Cos was unbelievable as well. They were both just remarkable, it was just a joy to watch both of them go to work, absolutely. Maybe unforgettable. You can retract that, Andy.
No, I will not. I've forgotten it already.
You've forgotten.
Well, you're just saying how bad Essendon were, and then you're saying,
but I mean, look, my nervousness is about the game. Wasn't so much, I really did sort of think I was worried, as it turns out, in hindsight, but I was worried for, that it was a banana peel game, but they weren't a team that's a banana peel. That's like, if we'd lost to them, then I would have really felt, oh God, the bottom's fallen out. The other thing is that, you can hardly compare this team that they put on the field to the one that in round 5 in gather round. Like about half a dozen players, not of their best players, were playing in gather round. It was. The main thing I was worried is it was an absolutely, really, really super critical game for our chances of finishing top 6. We just had to win that one. That was such a critical game. So even though it felt like low stakes because of the energy of the crowd, it was actually really, really high stakes for where we end up this season, I think. So all power to the club for taking the right attitude to it, to winning, putting it to bed so we weren't nervous and we weren't worried. So we can push forward to this week. I'll touch on it through the show, but I think King's preparation, the high performance team's preparation, has just been outstanding in the last month. Absolutely outstanding the way we've prepared this team. I'm amazed how well we're travelling, giving our injury list, and it really puts a lie, I think, to the sort of idea that we haven't got depth. And you look at Brisbane, whose injury list they're cratering, but a big power on the back must go to the high performance program. They've just been it's incredible given we haven't got a bye. And again, that's the thing that what's his name leans into. King leans into that all the time. And unlike the sort of standard coaching thing is you don't make any excuses. He talks about the fact we haven't had a bye. I must have heard him say it 20 times without exaggeration in the last 2 weeks, which I just love. Forget this old school, let's pretend it's not there. Let's name it, and plan for it, and let's move forward, and not thinking it's 1979 again.
All right. Well, we do have a question a bit later on. One of the first questions we've got about whether you were satisfied with how we won it or how much we won it by. So we'll get into that a bit shortly. But first, we've got some housekeeping before we get into the stats files. So each week I do invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast and leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. And we truly appreciate that feedback. And we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who share who take the time to share their reviews. And C. Apples writes, great podcast, a great D's analysis podcast, more in-depth than any of the media shows. The polite and informed discussion helps me understand what happened and what may happen week to week. Thanks, Andy, George, and B-Man. We'll keep those reviews coming and the comments coming in throughout 2026. Leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we do give the shout out like we gave C Apples. And don't forget, check out B-Man's Stats Files podcast. It drops every Friday. It's the companion pod to this show in the Demonland podcast universe, and B-Man gives a deep dive into the numbers behind the game, the stats that explain why the D's dominated or why things didn't quite click. He'll review the previous match and preview the upcoming one, so keep an eye out for that in the Demonland podcast feed every Friday. You can also follow us across social media on Facebook, Instagram, X. If you want to leave feedback, send through a question, just share your thoughts, or just share your thoughts on the show. Jump into the weekly podcast thread, or send us a DM. Don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. And you can find the Demonland podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Demonland Podcast, and don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you want to join in on the conversation with fellow D supporters, head on over to demonland.com. You can sign up for free and jump into the forums with fellow D's fans from across Australia and around the world. If you want to give the show a call and speak to us live on the air, give us a buzz on 0486 387 929. 0486 387 929. If you're listening on your phone now through demonland.com, just hit the call button on the player and it should open straight up into your phone app. You can also give that number a call during the week. Leave us a voice message for the podcast, and those calls do go directly to voicemails. You're not going to have an awkward conversation with an actual human being. Our chat room is back, so if you're listening live and you want to join in on the chat, just click the chat button on the podcast player. You'll need to be signed in, of course, and logged into Demonland to participate, but jump in with your questions and comments. We'll do our best to keep an eye on it throughout the night, and we'll give you a shout-out as well. You can catch the Demonland podcast live every Monday night at 8 p.m. on demonland.com. Well, Stats Files, let's get into it, B-Man. It's a condensed version of everybody's favourite segment, the Stats Files. B-Man, you take us through the key numbers and trends from the Bombers game. And I'll just mention again, if you like a deep dive into the stats, don't forget to look out for B-Man's standalone Stats Files podcast, which will drop on Friday, wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Take it away.
Thanks, Andy. And I'm going to need the podcast on Friday because I was preparing for this and there was just so much fantastic information, and I can't wait to dig deep into that Crows game. So I'm going to just go to the player ratings because I like to speak to that every week. Just in terms of the player ratings, a reminder it's about scoreboard impact, and this is a really simplistic way of looking at it. But if you think about a goal, pick any goal that Melbourne scored on the weekend, and take it from a point where there's a stoppage. Think about all of the players involved in that score, in that goal, in that scoring chain, and who, if you were to choose to say who was the most important link in that chain, that's essentially how the player ratings are arrived at. So if Cos does something remarkable and he's 50% of that score, well, he will get equity points for that. And in this game, some remarkable ratings. Maxi had a 25.3 his rating was in this game. Just nuts, just crazy. His season is off the charts. He's probably now, I haven't really looked at comparatively, but this is almost close to be his best season ever of AFL footy, which is remarkable given he's 34. 20 is considered an all-Australian level game of footy, and 20 rating points. He got 25.3. Cozzy Pickett, 24.7, another fantastic game. 12 of his points were accrued winning the ball, how he used the footy. His skills were electric, helped by the fact that they didn't put anyone near him, which I thought was bizarre. But, that's one of the challenges for Solomon, isn't it? What's the point? Really, what's the point? Sort of, you're not going to win the game. Why not try to drill in your own game plan? Trent Rivers, this is a really interesting one because, we talked about it last week. He was our third highest rated player, 16.7. Did most of his damage in the first half, and so did Max and Cozzy, which I'll unpack a bit in a second. 16.7, and his ball use was 9.1. Awesome. So of his 16.7 rating points, 9.1 of them were for how he used the ball. And he was really important in terms of our rebounding off that halfback flank. And, I think for me, halfback flank is his go. Ed Langdon had an awesome game, 15.4. His player rating points was he ran 15.9 kilometres. 16.9 kilometres last week. Unbelievable. 2 kilometres further than the next best, Lipinski. He only ran 14 kilometres in a bit in a much less high sort of octane game. So that was not surprising. But if I was watching him for a while, the amount of running he does in a game 5 days after running 17 kilometres against the Pies is berserk. And rounding out the top 5 is Jakey Lever. Had another good game, 14 player rating points. Down the bottom of the player rating points can be a little bit of a misnomer because, for instance, unrewarded running doesn't give you any player rating points because it's all geared towards what's your impact on the scoreboard, or did you negatively, did you turn it over and that you lose points for that? But nonetheless, Bailey Laurie was our lowest rated player with that caveat, 0.5 points. Lucas Cook, a bit unlucky, he 0.7. I thought he looked pretty good, unfortunately, with that injury. Luca Kenfield, 1, and he had 1 player rating points, and I actually wasn't super impressed, I have to say. He looks a bit slow off the mark, but we'll see. Van Rooyen was our 4th lowest rated player, 4.5, and Joel Fitzgerald next, 5.4. Interestingly, Joel Fitzgerald, I don't even talk about disposals anymore, but he had a mid-20s disposal game, and that 5.4 just shows that he didn't really have much impact scoreboard-wise with those disposals. Not to say he didn't have a good game. I thought he was terrific in his debut and, physically ready to rock and roll. But as a way of just thinking about the game from a stats point of view, King said in his presser, and paraphrasing here, that they knew that Essendon would be up for this game, or they assumed they would because of their connection to Neil Danaher, and that they'd want to perform for him. And that they had a clear focus coming into this game to get on the front foot and take the game away from them early doors. And that's exactly what they did. So my take is on this game, and why I'm saying this here, because it informs all of the analysis of the data, is we decided to go with no Heath, Maxi 1 out, because our major advantage over them is, as I said in the preview pod, is contested possessions and scores from stoppage. So we decided to go 1 out with Maxi, tell him to go for it and to look to fully leverage the huge advantage he had over Brian, which completely played out. Get a lead at halftime and then go into control mode with Maxi basically driving all of that. And that's exactly what we did. We worked a treat, if I'm right, and that was the plan, worked an absolute treat. He completely and utterly smashed Brian. And we had a big enough buffer at halftime to do exactly what I think was the plan, to go into control mode and conserve energy mode with a view to the game against the Crows. I have no little doubt that was the strategy. Pretty much that's what King said. Gawn is just on Gawn. He's having an all-time season, as I said, off a 5-day break with a bunged-up shoulder from the previous week. Gawn took all but one centre bounce. That's amazing. Well above his average this year or last year. Just an incredible performance. He was the highest-rated player on the ground, as I said before, 25.7 rating points, close to his highest-rated game this year, just 5 days after ripping it up against the Pies. He got 20.2 of his 25.7 points in the first half. In the first half of footy, that's an incredible half of footy. That's off the charts. 20.2 player rating points in a half of footy is bananas. Ditto for Cos. He went to all bar 3 centre bounces. So Cos, there was only 3 centre bounces all day that Cos didn't go to. That's crazy as well. He was our second highest rated player, 24.7 points. 20.4 of them were in the first half. So I have no doubt that they wound both of those players up, said to the team, let's get that lead. Let's smash them. Let's go hard in that first half. Let's get a lead and let's manage that lead from here. King talks about it all the time, about control and management of in-game. So in that third quarter, after dominating the first half, and I'll just quickly go by some of the quarter-by-quarter differentials, we were plus 23 for uncontested possessions in that third quarter, which really speaks to the plan of conserving energy. We were plus 31 for disposals. And that's really notable because we are a super, super low possession side. We are 17th in the AFL for a differential for uncontested possessions. We hardly ever have more disposal than the opposition. Basically never, let alone 31 more disposals in a quarter. So just looking through that quarter-by-quarter differential. So we were second quarter plus 19 disposals, third quarter, as I said, plus 31 disposals. We looked to control the ball, slow the ball down. We were plus 5 contested possessions in the first, plus 19 in the second when we really came out firing, plus 10 in the third. Uncontested possessions, we were minus 6. So this shows the different way of playing. Minus 6 uncontested possessions in the first quarter when we were playing the game that we normally play, plus 23 uncontested possessions in the third quarter. They are 2 diametrically different types of games, quarter 1 to quarter 3. Inside 50s, we're plus 11, plus 5, plus 9, minus 3 in the last. In terms of how we use the ball, we were plus 24.2 for equity ball use in that first quarter. Incredible first quarter from a ball use perspective. Looking at the team pressure, 161 in that first quarter. Kingy wouldn't have been happy with that because of that plan to come in and smash them. They were 170, so they were plus 9 for pressure. I think he's given them a pretty big rev up at quarter time. I had the binoculars on him for the whole quarter, and King was as animated as I've seen him. He's not particularly animated, coach. We came out breathing fire in that second quarter, 185 to 177, plus 8. In the last quarter, we fought that really well out, 184 to 167, plus 17. The third quarter, so speaking to what I'm saying about that strategy of playing keepings off and conserving energy, keeping some fuel in the tank for the Essendon game, in that third quarter, a season low pressure rating for us, 140 in a quarter, that is, 140 pressure rating to 159. They were plus 19 for pressure. That's because we were keeping the ball off them as indicated by the uncontested possessions and disposals. Some notable stats. We had 22 more inside 50s than the Bombers, the highest differential we've had since round 11, 2024. We were 33-18 for inside 50s from midfield intercepts, which really shows the way that we play. We are a forward half low disposal team, scoring 7 goals, 7 to 3-4 from that source. Over the last 6 weeks, we've gone from one of the worst defences we were one of the worst defences in the AFL in the first 8 weeks to 4th best in the last 6 weeks. We're third picking up this inside 50s from midfield intercepts. We're number 3 in the last 6 weeks for forward half intercepts in the last 6 weeks. In the last 6 weeks, Maxi's been the 4th highest rated player in the AFL. Cos number 8 in the AFL. Just as out of interest, Jordan Dawson is number 1. His first quarter apparently was the highest ever or second highest ever rated single quarter since Champion Data have been keeping those stats. And again, speaking to the way we were playing after recording a kick to handball ratio in the first half, in the first three terms of 1.47, we increased that ratio of 2.19 in the final term. So very low handballs, but lots of kicking to keep the ball off it. Now, quickly, just finally, just a number of stats that really, I think, help us understand what our game plan actually looks like. So at this point of the season, as King said today in his interview on SEN, we've got more than a big enough sample size to get a handle on what our game plan looks like. We averaged 34.6 fewer uncontested possessions than our opponents this season, the second biggest differential in the competition. Richmond are the biggest. So it really describes we play different to some of the leading teams. So by way of contrast, at the opposite end of the table, number one for most differential are the Hawks. They averaged 37.2 more uncontested possessions than their opponents. That's a 72-point difference to us. That's huge. Freo are second on that, with 28.3 more uncontested possessions than their opponents, and Swans are fourth for uncontested differential. Radically different to the way those teams played, and the three of the top four teams. We averaged 2.8 more centre clearances than our opponents this season, number two in the AFL. 40.2 points per game from stoppages this season, number four in the AFL. 21.6 points per game from defensive midfield chains, which is really important about where we start our scoring chains, which are from the midfield, because we're a territory team that looks to get it forward, keep it forward. Number two in the AFL for that stat, 21.6 per game from defensive midfield chains, and 20.9% of our shots at goal. I found this really fascinating. 20.9% of our shots at goal this season have been on the run, so not set shots. Number two in the AFL. So that again speaks to our method, which is kick long to a contest, let the ball hit the deck and score from there, which is what we're number two or number one now for long kicking in the AFL. That's it for this week, but there's a bunch of stats. I'm really looking forward to digging into this in more detail on the preview pod.
I was on mute. Sorry about that. Thank you for that, B-Man. Look forward to hearing the long-form stats files, which you can find dropping on Friday, just in time for our game. When's our game this week? It's on Saturday. Yeah?
Yep.
1:15, but I think I'm going to have to go as live. I can't believe it because I live just down the road from Williamstown, and the AFL, can't believe it.
The Casey game
starts at 12:05. The seniors start at 1:15. You don't think we've been playing at 10 a.m. at Casey on some games? Why couldn't they start that game at 11? Give people a chance to watch it, go to see the game live or watch the stream, and then watch the game against the Crows straight after. It's the AFL, a fair income. It's like, don't get me started. It's just driving me nuts. Their fixturing this season. So I think I'm going to go watch the Casey game at Williamstown and as live it. But I'm nervous.
How do you do that? How do you do that without knowing or wanting to know the score when you know it's right there at your fingertips? Can't do it. You got a lot more self-control than I do. Let's get into the listener questions. Pew, pew, pew writes, now look, I'll be honest, I came away from Saturday's game with mixed feelings, and I'm curious whether you blokes felt the same, because on one hand, 45-point win, fourth on the ladder, 9 wins for the season, you can't argue with that. But there was something about the performance that didn't quite sit right with me. The third quarter wobble and letting them getting a sniff, the wasteful inside 50 entries, moments where we just couldn't put the foot down against the competition's bottom side. And I know the context matters with the 5-day break, the wet conditions, and let's not forget this is the same great Essendon side that smashed us by 45 points at Gatherround just 2 months ago. So maybe I'm being too hard on them, but my question to you is, and be honest, were you satisfied with how Melbourne performed against Essendon, or do performances like this still leave you with the doubts about where this team sits heading into the business end of the season? So George Pew 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 wasn't the only one on Demonland left wanting more after the win. There were plenty on the the post-game thread that sort of echoed the same sentiments. Some of us can be a little bit greedy. Were you completely satisfied with the performance and happy to simply bank the 4 points, or was there something about the way we played that still leaves you with some doubts about the team despite the result?
No, I was satisfied with what we produced simply because it was what we had to produce in this particular game. There was a couple of things. The 5-day break, don't
sleep
cast
on
that aside as a minor thing. It was a really, really important factor. We had to perform coming off that 5-day break. It's proven time and time again to be problematic, not just for us, but for all teams. We certainly put the queue in the rack, as Bin Man's numbers have indicated.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was there was a real threat of weather.
It came later than expected.
Exactly, yeah.
But at the start, later.
At the start of the game, there was a real threat. Okay, let's get some score on the board. Let's get in front before the weather hits, because we don't want to be in a close tussle by the time that it does. And that's exactly what happened. So that was, which also suited us in terms of putting Essendon to the sword nice and early. I think we had a 4-goal lead at very early on in the first quarter. So everything that we were doing was exactly right. And then we were able to basically put the queue in the rack in the second half. So while the supporters might be disappointed with not getting a 100-point win, and they're fantastic, at the end of the day, it's 4 points. That's all we get out of this. So so that was pleasing. We had to do what we had to do, was also to help out Andy's MFCSS, because this is a typical game that we would throw according to his MFCSS. So we had to look after Andy in particular. What I particularly liked was, even given all the circumstances that we faced on this day, we introduced 2 new players who weren't there 10 days ago.
It's crazy, isn't it, George?
Yeah,
it's really amazing.
And 2 players, which certainly up to even for Cook, you look at them and their performances, you go, yeah, they're going to be there next week. They're going to be part of the team for quite some time. So that's fantastic. But what really, really impressed me about this game was the last 2.5 minutes, when Jake Lever absolutely on his own stopped a certain Essendon goal. And you go, here's a guy who's coming up for his 200th game next week. The game's well and truly over. We're 45 points up, and he threw himself into that contest to deny Essendon. So, I think we got more out of this game than what people expect. Like I said, the supporters might be disappointed because it wasn't a thrashing, but it was exactly what we needed.
Yeah, spot on, George. Just spot on. I mean, I don't know what people want. The line in this game, the betting line, and there's, not pumping up punting or anything, but I've followed the betting line for a long, long time, and it is by far the most reliable sort of measure, because punters are putting their money on it. The market speaks. The line was 37 points. We covered the line, and for people this is, I say every year when we have these sorts of conversations about percentage, we kept them to, what was their final score? 50 points. We score more percentage. You're the mathematician amongst us, George, but. If we win by 60 points, scoring 130 to 70, we get less percentage than we did in the game that by keeping them to 50 and winning by 40 points. So it depends what you want. Do you want a high scoring game with lots of sugar but not as much percentage, or do you want to crush the opposition and keep them to 50 points and have a higher percentage? Smart footy all round. There's a fantastic
and then go into the game next week with a buggered side that coming up against an informed side.
Exactly.
You'll lose all your percentage next week.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking at the numbers, I didn't do. I'll do it for the weekend. For the preview pod. But our running distance numbers were completely different to Collingwood. We ran a lot further against. We ran. I'll better check that. My assumption is we ran a lot further, so maybe the data won't against the Pies than we did in this game. And so it was clever management. The whole thing was clever management. And I think, George, that you can't underestimate bringing 2 new players into a system in a team that's been in flux just with our injuries. That meant there were 3 players in that team who, at the beginning of the season, were playing VFL footy. Cross, Cook, and Fitzgerald were all playing VFL footy. And so, at the beginning of the season. So really remarkable stuff, I reckon. There's a post on, I was trying to grab it then, I couldn't see it. There's a post from D in a kilt on Demon Land that talked about the game from a different perspective. I just thought it was a brilliant post. he talked about the care the players were showing for each other on the field and the support that they were, in particular, the support they were giving Fitzgerald. That when he made a mistake or that he at one point, Dean Akilt noted that he was frustrated with himself for making an error, and Colt and Lever both made a focus in the next thing to go pump him up, and then when he did something good to get, and the point really being the sort of that love and care and genuineness that King has. You can feel it in the players and the way they're going about things.
I was going to bring this up in the next question, or one of the next questions, where we talk about the debutants, but you got to remember Cook is just coming into a team that has a system, obviously, in defence. Might not be as system-based as when Goody was there, but there's obviously still some system. And he's coming into a team and that he doesn't know anything about. And I could see quite a few times he would keep looking back to Lever, and Lever was just pointing him, showing him where to go. So this is a guy who's coming into the team. He's obviously got skills and a lot of talent, and we'll talk about that in a minute because it's a great intercept marker. He looked like he knew what he was doing. A pity that he's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, he's learning on the job effectively. Yeah. He's an intern that's learning on the job as he's going, and he did a very good job. So you got to sort of factor that into to last week's game. Well,
and I hate to go, I'm really getting sort of on Demon Land irritated with constantly sort of referencing King's positive, almost the corollary always being, better than Goody or Goody doing that. But, imagine Cook coming into that back line with Stephen May at his vocal best. Like it's a different, the Dean Akilt's point's a really good one. There's a really sort of positive vibe amongst that playing group. And it was really evident what you're saying with the instruction to Cook. And that's what, it's funny you should say that, Andy. I don't know if you listened to Stephen King this morning that you put the link up.
Yeah.
Did you listen to that?
Yeah.
He was asked about two players joining, and his answer was that, their teammates made it really possible, and much, that because of their support for them, and that the sort of, I guess, the camaraderie and the care for each other, it's really impressive, isn't it? That sort of in the vibe that's coming out from the club and the players, and I think that shows in how they're playing.
Pingu writes, what is going on with our key forwards? Despite Melbourne consistently kicking winning scores, our key forwards seem to be battling. They rarely appear to be leading at the ball carrier and are regularly struggling to take marks inside 50. Some of that can be attributed to the quality of delivery going forward. While we're consistently dominating the inside 50 count, we're not converting that territorial advantage into scores at a rate we probably should be. When I watch other teams, they seem to find key forwards on the lead far more often than we do, whether that's due to better movement from the forwards, cleaner delivery from the midfield, or a combination of both. It's a noticeable difference. As long as we're winning, it might not seem like a major concern, but it's an area that has the potential to become a problem later in the season, particularly against the strongest sides when opportunities are harder to come by and efficiency inside 50 becomes critical. Now with Petty likely to be out for a couple of weeks and Myercheck out for the rest of the season, we'll be stuck with a very inexperienced and underperforming forward line. Divarev responds, our key forwards are more about providing a contest, bringing the ball to ground and locking the ball in rather than kicking bags. Petty has been good at this season, and JVR does seem to be doing better further up the ground. If you look at our goal kickers this year, there is quite the spread with a lot of half forwards and wingers in there similar to the Lions. My only issue with our key forwards is the injury issue. If Petty is out, the cupboard is pretty bare with Jeffo, 5 goals against some under-14s. Luca, 2 games, and Melksham, 2 goals, but below his best. Might need Cozzy to kick 12 this week. And Smurf adds, I want to talk about how we're entering the forward 50 because I don't think this is a one-game thing. The pattern of just bombing it long into the forward line with forwards who aren't leading hard at the ball carrier feels like it's crept back over the last month or so. We all lived through 2022 and to 2025, so it's a familiar and uncomfortable sight. Now, maybe that's fatigue, maybe it's personnel with my checkout, or maybe it's something the coaches need to address in terms of how we're structuring our forward half entries and teaching our forwards how to lead and present. So my question to you guys is, are you concerned about the way Melbourne is entering the forward 50? Is it becoming a bit of a habit? And if so, is that a coaching problem, a personnel problem, or a bit of both? So, B-Man, many have raised the forward 50 entries as a bit of concern, but we're winning games. So maybe there's a different way to look at it. And I'm sure with your positive Binner's lens, we're going to get to that rosy red point of view. So how do you see what's happening in the forward line at the moment? Is it actually a problem, or is it just the way that this group plays?
I was keen to have this question, and I spent a bit of time sort of drilling down, but I haven't got all of the numbers that I wanted to. But the short answer is the question is got the wrong premise, because it presupposes there's a problem, which there's not. I've been talking about this all season. At least from round 6, round 7, we are a territory team, a low disposal territory team. It's what I just said. We are number 17 in the AFL for uncontested differential. Everyone got seduced by our fast ball movement in those first 3-4 games. And that is certainly one of the tools in our tool bag, but it is not the central DNA of our game. The central DNA of our game, you just listen to King, what he talks about. The number one thing is running. Athletic profile. He almost says athletic profile every single time he has an interview. He said it 4 times this morning. It's all about running player. He said that this morning as well. The modern footy is all about running. So that's number one. Then, of course, just like every other team, contest and defense. Then it's the transition. We are pretty good at transitioning the ball from the back half. We were in this game. I heard Gary Lyon. Finally, they're starting to talk about this, about fatigue in a more sophisticated way. It's finally coming up. So he made a good way of describing it last night on 360 of splitting the season up into the home and away into 3 groups of 8. So the first 8, everyone's up and about. All the teams are playing their high energy, high octane, the best footy, particularly the teams playing the high transition footy. That middle 8 games is the middle of the season where fatigue sets in, particularly for the younger sides where they struggle. And the last 8 of the season is where teams are starting to get ready for the finals and the spring gets in the step. Anyone who's watched footy, leaving aside high performance thing, anyone who's watched footy as long as we have, that's exactly what happens every year. Even back in the days when there wasn't high performance programs, the middle of the year was always the time when teams would struggle. As it turns out, that neatly works for us because our bye is round 16. But he's exactly right. It happens every single season. Just look at Brisbane's last 3 games. I think one of the things King has really cleverly done is we have been talking about this on the preview pod. We don't have we've got an A game when we're up and about, and our finals will look like will be a bit more high transition, will be faster because we'll be better prepared for that. But what King has done super well is I think, been really influenced by Chris Scott, and he horses for courses. We have almost a different strategy every week. And for the last 5-6 weeks, as I've been talking about, we are going long. We are much to everyone's frustration. We talked about exactly the same. We had this discussion against the Dogs. Why are we kicking long to the top of the goal square? Well, because it worked for a start. We didn't win that game, but our percentage rate was super impressive. So, in this game, for instance, our in terms of our goals per inside for our scores for inside 50. Our scores for inside 50 in this game was 47.6% of the time we went inside 50, we scored a goal. That's above our season average. Our season average for scores for inside 50 is 44.9. AFL average is 46.2. So in this game, we were above our season average, above AFL average for our percentage of scores for inside 50. So it worked. The strategy of kicking long to a contest worked. Before I go on, George, you wanted to jump in there?
Oh, I was just going to mention the same thing. Every time we lose, people say we've kicked it, bombed it into the forward line. Well, guess what? That's what we do every single game.
Yeah.
And the reason we do it is because the way that, and it's not just us. Again, it's all the top 6 teams are all doing the same thing.
In particular, Cats.
Yep. You get it in there and you get it to a contest and you get it to ground, and the outcome is what we're seeing. We're not seeing, Tom Hawkins kick 10 goals in the game and the rest of the team kick 5. It's the other way around these days. You see Cameron might kick 5, the rest of the team kicks 10. for the same result. That's the way the game's played these days. So people had better get used to it, because that's what's happening. It's important that we've gone to the three tall forwards model for the same reason. It's about providing opportunities up forward and also limiting that centre halfback interceptor role that has been the model for the last couple of years. So, yeah, you better get used to it, folks. That's the way it's played. And you don't get the opportunities that, people say, oh, you should lower your eyes and go for the guy in the lead. It doesn't happen in the game these days. Watch how quickly oppositions flood the back line. There are just no spaces. And the only time you see that happening is usually off a centre bounce, where somebody comes out the front of the pack and there's a 6-6-6 situation. There's just not the space these days.
Exactly, particularly when you're playing the way Melbourne are at the moment. So I think we'll go back to our best footy looks like round 1s, 2, 3 and 4. That's our best, when we're playing that high transition. But that's what everyone was seduced by and thinking that's how we're going to play. You're exactly right, George. So you don't get any space inside forward to lead into if you are playing a territory game and you're winning that territory game. So I forget what it was in the first quarter. I think it was 60-40 in that first quarter, for instance. And you play a team like Essendon, who their only way of beating us is to flood their defence. They're not going to beat us in a transition game. But the thing about that question about leading into space, that only happens when you get the arc-to-arc movement. That's when you get that high transition, exactly like we did last week. So last week we had 13 marks inside 50. This week we only had 7. I predicted we would have twice as many. We had only had 7 against the Dogs as well. I predicted that we'd have twice as many, or 13, 14 against the Pies, because I predicted that we would be playing a high handball metres gained game. In this game, last week, the Pies had over 900 metres gained from handball. We had 628 metres gained. So what's that? 1,528 metres gained by hand. And remember, it's like Scar. It's that middle missing beat. It's the handball distance plus how far you run with the ball. That's the running with the ball is actually the more important part of that equation than the actual handball itself. Only the Swans have had more metres gained than the Pies did last week, over a kilometre. So in that Pies game, there was like 1,500 metres gained. In this game, the total metres gained in this was 278. So there's no way to generate that space that George is doing. If you're not bouncing back and forward, that's what creates space in your forward line to move into. That's where you get uncontested marks inside your 50, because it's bouncing back between the two teams' forward line, or the two arcs. We only had 226 metres gained this week, almost 400 metres gained less than last week. The Bombers only had 52 metres gained by hand this week. That is nothing. So they're not moving the ball at pace by hand, nor are we. Almost a kilometre less metres gained by hand, which describes the way the game was played. So it's not a problem. It's a clear strategy, and I think King's genius, like his coaching skill, genius is probably overstating at this part of his career, is if you watch the game, particularly if you're looking at the numbers the way I do, it's remarkable how different they are week in, week out, depending on our opponent. And in that thing that I was talking about a few weeks ago, that strategy coach versus a system coach, he's definitely in the strategy camp. But he's also, I think he's done something that we haven't done particularly well over the last few years with, again, loath to contradict myself and compare him to Goody. But Goody's had one way of playing, and that was drilled into them. And he was always criticised it for not having a B plan. King's got a B, C, D, E, and F plan. And not only does he tailor that plan to who our opponent is, to take away their strengths and maximize our strengths. He also is clearly doing it to look what George was saying about the planning of where we are in our game cycle. So the whole strategy of this week was as much about thinking about next week as it was this game, and that's super clever. So what we're doing with those long kicks to the forward line is deliberate. It's not so we don't need to change anything. Just the final thing. So George, I'll just jump in. The final thing is exactly as George said before. No one's taking contested marks in footy anymore. It's 8.9 contested marks per game in the AFL now. Like, I don't know when I have no idea, but I'd be guessing in the 80s it was probably 15 to 20 contested marks per game. a tick above 8 contested marks per game is nothing. So, as George said, it's all about territory, bringing it to ground. That's where we score. As I said before, number 2 in the AFL for scores from not set shot. So that all ties together with a clear. They're clearly trying to do, kick long to that contest to those marking forwards.
I'm totally confused now, Bin Man. I don't know the relationship between ska music and handball.
Well, it is a bit of a stretch, but in ska there's a missing beat, which is the half beat. And in the handball meters gained, which is, again, what they should make this clear on the coverage, because in handball meters gained, it's not how far the ball just goes by the handball. It is, if you handball 15 metres, the player receives it and runs 15 metres and then handballs. That's 45 metres gained by hand. But no one talks about the running in the middle. That's the missing ska beat there, George.
And for our listeners who have got no idea what ska music is, maybe we'll leave that for another day.
Who doesn't know what ska music is? Come on, George.
All right. Whilst we're talking about our forward line, it's probably a good place to discuss this rather than wait for the changes section of the program. So Newey Demon writes, "Love your work, guys. I've been listening to the pod for a few years and recently joined Demonland. This is my first question. With Checkers injured and Petty also potentially out, what should we do in the forward line? Should we play JVR, Kenfield and Jeffo, or is there another option, possibly bring Moose in and rotate the Maxes forward, or could we go smaller? What does the panel think?" So welcome to Demonland, Newey Demon, and thanks for being a loyal listener to the podcast. So George, Newey Demon is the latest to ask the question we're all wrestling with. The forward line stocks are running pretty thin right now due to some injuries. What do you think the club actually does up forward without Myercheck? Now Petty's going to be out for 3 or 4 weeks. Jeffo's kicked 5.5 at Casey before being rested. What's happening this week with our forward?
I think Newey D gave the answer because we've got not many options available to us, particularly this week. We're having lost both lost Petty and also Myercheck, which were 2 essentials in our forward line. So the only options really are JVR and Kenfield obviously stay in. And the question will be, do we bring in Moose or do we bring in Jeffo to try and place the forward line? So look, I really don't know. Moose is running a little bit injured at the moment. He was carrying a shoulder injury apparently in the last week. Saw him at training. He looks okay. Saw him at training today. He looks okay, but there was no simulation, so didn't get to see him use his shoulder. Jeffo kicked 5 goals this week in barely half a game against, as was described by Rev D, I think before, as against the under-14s. So it's hard to judge whether the opposition were that bad or Jeffo has turned the corner. So I don't know.
George,
the idea is obviously we do need the people in the side. Given the Adelaide have got 3 defenders who are all over 190 centimetres, so we're probably going to need 3 talls effectively to counter those this week. And particularly, as we've just talked about, you need to create contest in the forward line. So how we do that'll be the interesting thing to come up this week.
Sorry, George, I know that, sorry to interrupt before the I know you'll talk about Casey's game later, but I saw bits of it, but only in the second half. What was your assessment of did you watch it?
Yeah.
What was your assessment of Jeffo's first half?
He had 5 goals quite literally by halfway through the second quarter, and then they took him off.
But 5 goals, great. You can't knock that. There's no way.
No, you can't knock that.
Sometimes the first, I did see the first one, and it was a Joe the Goose from Petrel, I think. But
it's just so difficult because the seniors were poor, the reserves are even poorer, and we've got a couple of players, like Jeffo, who are obviously better than VFL, maybe not quite up to AFL, but when you put them down to the VFL level, they really can shine. And against a side that is was quite pathetic, you really expected him to kick 5 goals. But certainly didn't expect him to kick 5 goals in the first quarter and a half, which is what he did.
But did it have what was his contest like? And
well, there was no opposition contest. Was the trouble that he was marking it quite well, but there was so little contest there from the Essendon backs. It's really hard to judge.
Right. So I mean, for me, it really is a curious one because I mean, losing Myercheck and Petty are two players that are play specific roles, particularly Petty. Petty, George, is the exemplar of what you're saying. Is really, it's not about marks, it's not about goals, it's bringing the ball to the ground and physically competing and doing that work, which I think is important for JVR. It allows him to get out in front and use his leg speed. Kenfield's going to have to play that role this week, and he's got to get a bit more involved, I think, for us to be competitive. The other thing I worry about a little bit is, I mean, you've lost two key forwards, it's going to be hard, is I have to say I've not really been super impressed with Heath's sort of forward craft. He doesn't look like a natural forward. So that idea of playing him as a resting forward, I don't know. What's your take on his sort of forward craft?
Well, it's sort of like I think the same applies for both Maxes, doesn't it? Neither of them are forwards. Whether it's just a question of resting them down, like I said, Adelaide have got three tall, real 190 plus centimetre backs. You almost have to have someone there just to stop them doing that intercept role, which they'd so like. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting call the way they approach this game.
Yeah, well, and the other two players in the mix, Frida could play less on the wing and deeper, but King really likes him further up the ground. So do I with his elite kicking.
Yep.
And the other one who might get a reprieve, who probably would be lucky if he does, and I'm not convinced that he will, is Melksham, who's the other piece of the puzzle up forward. And I can't see if without Petty's injury, surely he wasn't very impressive. I didn't think so.
No, if he hadn't kicked the 2 goals, I wouldn't have even known he played. to be honest.
In all honesty, the tired old legs just cannot run, and that's the basis of the game these days. And when your opposition's running off you all the time, it's far too critical for the side.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of the thinking was it was actually surprising it didn't rain. I think the wet weather was a factor in his selection, and it was supposed to be raining well and truly by game time and didn't really start. I mean, it started raining in the second half a little bit, but didn't come down. So, and funnily enough, when it did get a bit heavier is when he got his first goal, when the ball hit the deck and he kicked a nice goal.
Mandalorian writes, would love to get your thoughts on the performances of our debutants. It was probably the perfect week to expose these 2 mid-season draftees to senior football after a couple of impressive games at Casey. I was really impressed with Lucas Cook before he was injured midway through the second quarter. He'd already taken a couple of nice marks and used the ball well when he got his opportunities. It was gutting to see his day cut short because he looked right at home at the level. Unfortunately, he'll spend some time on the sidelines and have to work his way back into the side. But from what we saw, I think he has a future at the club. As for Joel Fitzgerald, I was super impressed with his game. He looks like the exactly type of player we need. He has a real knack for hunting the footing, was constantly working hard at ground level, whether it was extracting the ball from congestion or laying some strong tackles. To finish with 26 disposals from just 68% game time is an outstanding return. More importantly, he looked physically capable of competing at AFL level from the moment he stepped onto the ground. Based on that performance, I'd be very surprised if he's not a lock to hold his spot in the team. And Lazy adds 10 players under 50 games, and I was extremely impressed with how most of them stood up. Joel Fitzgerald, how is someone who plays like that in their first game passed over in 4 drafts? Thoughts on his performance and his role going forward. So, big man, Jason Taylor appears to have struck again. Your thoughts on the 2 debutants?
Impressive, both of them. He looked ready to rock and roll, didn't he, as an AFL footballer physically. Fitzgerald, Cook less so. I think it speaks to just how important running has become and fitness has become in footy. King made the point that both of those players, it was really about selection integrity because he took it back for the entire VFL season. Said both Cook and Fitzgerald have been dominating it. Where was Cook before Melbourne?
Sandford.
Sandford, yeah.
Sandford.
Woodwell West Torrens, I think.
Yep.
Right,
yep.
Well, King made the point that both were dominating in the lower level, so they deserve just on that form. Cook less so, but Fitzgerald looks like he's been ripping Nick physically. And it was great to see a debut from a player who was ready to physically sort of take the hits. I thought he was really impressive. He didn't look overawed. He looked like a sort of cut down version of Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
Speaking
do not mention that. He does not like that. He does not.
Oh,
like
he doesn't.
That. He does not like
he shouldn't
that.
bloody grow a creepy moustache and have short hair then. Well, what's he talking about, Fitzy? So, no, I thought he was really impressive, and it was interesting because he basically took all of the CBAs that Windsor would have otherwise taken. He hasn't got Windsor's breakaway pace, but, again, we only used 4, maybe 5 players in CBAs, and he was one of them. I thought he was terrific. I thought Cook, not so much in terms of he showed some of the things I just love about. He reminded me a little bit of Howes, the way he reads the ball super well. He's a good height. It sort of made me think of Lever's comment a couple of weeks ago or last week that the talls really have to get up, be prepared to play on smalls as well under King's defensive system. Just on our defensive system, it's super improved. As I said before, we were averaging giving up 100 points a game after around 6 or 7 now. It's down to 85 in the last 5 games or something, something like that, 86. So our defensive system has been has much improved, as I noted before. Of the two, to be honest, even though Fitzgerald had a better game, I would really excited from what I've seen by Lucas Cook. I only really saw a little bit in the Casey game, but just a couple of his decision making, he looked like he's, I don't know, got a bit of an X factor about him. He looks calm. He reminds me a bit of as I say, of Howes, and he could be one of those players who can play tall and also play on the medium forward. So I was really impressed with flashes of his play.
And before you go in, George, I think what's good about both of them, look, they've come in midway through the year. They haven't had an AFL preseason under their belt ever, let alone this year. So I'm excited by what I saw and future-wise what they can do next year, full preseason under their belt, providing they get a go. I'm not sure what their list situation is going into next year. But with a full preseason under the belt, I think both of them have an exciting future, George.
Yeah, I just had Bin Man can answer the question in a week or so's time, but the commentators were saying that the club record for a debut number of possessions was 27. I can't find anything better than Ricky Petard's 20, and so it'll be interesting. If here's a guy who's come out and potentially performed, in a debut game the best of any Melbourne player ever.
68% game time as well is very impressive. Yeah. Imagine if he had 70 or 8, close to 70, but if he'd had 80% game time, we'd be looking at numbers of 30.
Yeah, but just as equally, I was just as impressed with Cook. We've seen him for 3 games in total, but he reads the ball so well, and he's just that natural defender. He is a born defender, and to slot straight into the side, as Andy was saying before. Given that defence requires knowledge about what your teammates are doing and where they're going, and in what patterns and things like that. He's even in that short period of time, he looked absolutely right at home. Which is also
a pre-season under their belt, learning the system with their teammates, which they haven't had much time to do. So imagine what they're going to be like in 6 months' time once we're in pre-season for next year.
Particularly a system that isn't as clearly defined as, say, it was under Goody, where it was really clear. Like even from a fan's perspective, you could see exactly what the structure was. A bit connected with what I was saying before about how King's game plan is really fluid depending on who we're playing and where we are in the sort of high performance cycle. It changes up, and so it's not like he could come in and slot in and take the intercepting role that Lever did under Goody, for instance. It must be a very challenging defensive system to sort of play. One of the big things in it is how, and this is again connected to whether we want to play a high, fast transition game, is how high up the defenders push. And in the last few weeks, we haven't been pushing up as high. So we're not except for the Pies game where we generated that, but we've been sitting a bit deeper. But he's got that one thing, I think, for me, in terms of the best players, the one thing that stands out for me is that sort of, it's a cliche, I know, but that idea that they've got time. They've got a little bit more time with ball in hand. And he strikes me as that. He looked like he had a little, not flustered. I thought it was both of them, they're really impressive.
So we may as well talk about it now. I know we're talking changes later, but he's out. He's out for 4 weeks. One of those is the bye. With only one guy that can really replace him this week, and that's T-Mac, because we're coming up against a team that's got 3. Is Taylor Walker back in the team for the Crows?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got 3 talls in the forward line as well at Adelaide with Tilthorpe and Fogarty and Tex. So T-Mac replaces Cook.
T-Mac looks to be the logical replacement.
By different roles. Cook
quite
impressive.
we need
role, I thought.
But it's just a case of who takes Tex. Tex isn't a speedy option by any stretch. He's a strength. He's a strength and battle it out sort of player. T-Mac's probably fits that nicely.
Yeah, he's their best bet for. I mean, I reckon I suspect if Petty was playing, they would have put Petty back.
Yeah, Petty's not playing, so that's why I'm asking this question.
And so T-Mac, surely, with Adams not out, T-Mac's got to come in. And he was, interestingly, T-Mac was taken off the ground at sort of halfway through the third quarter, I think. So was Jefferson.
That was obvious. So there's your answer, I think.
That's a pretty big tell, isn't it, I think, in terms of... I was going to ask you, George, before, but I didn't want to put it on you, in terms of doing one of the interesting things, you mentioned time on ground. He was only 68% time on ground, Fitzgerald. They're using time on ground, as George noted a little while ago, but I think in a really clever way as part of their way of their sort of high performance and their preparation of the players. So it was really interesting looking at, in this game, 68%. Trent Rivers was 76% again. Luca Canfield only 68%, Bailey Laurie only 64%, Lucas Cook, he was injured obviously, was only 32%, but up at the other end, Daniel Turner didn't go off the ground, Jake Lever didn't go off the ground, 100% game time, both of them. Harry Sharp 93% game time, Cade Chandler 86%. So I don't really, there's a real art, isn't it, in terms of manipulating game time, George, in terms of the player preparation.
Yeah, particularly for the younger ones, you don't want to bang them up unnecessarily. It is a brutal long season, even for these guys coming in at this point in the season. So, you've got to protect them sometimes.
Yeah, and Cozzy, the other interesting one was Cozzy but Cozzy, he averages, I think it's sort of up 85, 86. He only had 80% game time in this game.
He was off for quite a long time at one stage, and I would dare say that's probably just to rest him, give him that in-game rest time, managing him in-game.
Doesn't seem to be impacting him too much, those trips to Darwin, does it?
No, not at all. He's the type that could slot back in very easily. So along with our key forwards, I think the Max Gawn succession plan and managing Max Gawn is the next most talked about topic on this podcast. We seem to be getting questions about it each week, and Gawn of the Dead writes, I'm wondering what the panel thinks about the ruck situation. Max was very good again this weekend. However, we have gone and picked up Max Heath and another ruckman in Mapley in the mid-season draft. It would appear that there is still yet to be a succession plan in place at all. This makes me feel like either Gorney goes again or the club is not properly thinking about how to bring in our next ruck in Heath. Do you feel that Heath is being played in the twos to assist Kalani and prevent him from rucking? Wondering the panel's thoughts on the usage of Heath right now, as I'm sure he's probably feeling a whole lot like he did under Rowan Marshall at the Saints. So, George, the great ruck succession plan is a topic, as I said, that keeps coming up. We've got Max Heath developing at Casey. We've brought in Mapley as a replacement for Tom Campbell, and Kalani's learning the craft, albeit spending some time as a forward at Casey at the moment. But still not entirely clear what the club's long-term plan is for life after Max. And looking at the present, do you think there's a case for managing Max more proactively this season, even within games, to help keep him fresh for September?
I think we have absolutely got a succession plan in place, particularly where we were even 12 months ago, where we had Tom Campbell at, 35 or something. He was our sole backup.
Yeah.
That was it. There was no one else. We're depending on Roo and other people to, take cutouts in the ruck. We've got Max now sitting at 34. His contract is to the end of 2027. So, realistically, I'd say that he'd be looking at his career ending at that point or thereabouts. We don't want it to. We want him to last forever. But
what are you saying? I'm going to cry already.
Yeah.
There's always a possibility he'll sign a 1 year contract.
He'll play to his 50, I reckon.
Right. Okay. But he is 34 at the moment. He'll be 36 at that point. There's not too many players.
End of 27.
Yeah, the end of 27. Yeah. We've now got Max Heath. He's 23. So he's an established ruckman who's been in the system since he was 18 or thereabouts. His contract goes to the end of 2028. So we've got a backup ruck who's young as opposed to a backup ruck who's 35, which is the first stage of it. Beneath them, we've now got Mapley at age 20, who's 3 years behind Max Heath, and then we've got Kalani White, who's 19, so he's another 12 months behind. So we've actually got an age profile of potential rucks that will serve us for many years to come if they're all successful. If Max Gawn goes at the end of 2027, then Max Heath will become the prime ruck. He'll be 25 years of age, absolutely perfect age for ruckman. He would have built up necessarily. I mean, we've all been around long enough to know that Max Gawn didn't hit his straps probably until an equivalent sort of period of time. So we actually have a line and a succession of rucks now that we didn't have before. The Saints gave us an absolute ripper in terms of Max Heath, not just because he was behind Marshall as number 2, but he would have been behind De Koning as well. So there was no point Max Heath, staying at St Kilda. He'd be very happy to have got out of St Kilda, particularly if you don't have to be coached by Ross Lyon. So I'm sure he's quite happy. We spoke to Max before the season. Brilliant young bloke. He didn't anticipate he'd get a lot of game time this year as he learnt the trade, so to speak. But I think he's being expected to do a lot more than what he personally anticipated. I think he will be a big factor in years to come. The reports were that he had some sort of shoulder injury that he carried into the Casey game this week, and he was certainly down on his performances in that Casey game from what I saw. Not as dominating around the ground. He was back training today. But I think in the future, the dual ruck situation will develop certainly over the next 2 years. And the teams, again, at the top who are using the dual rucks are the Fremantles, Geelongs, Hawthorns and Brisbane. The only one is probably Sydney, but they use Grundy and Hayden McLean, who's 199 or something ridiculous in any case, as their backup. So the dual rucks is becoming the standard almost in the competition. So I think we'll use Max Heath a lot more in that role as the season progresses, and it helps to protect our Max Gawn.
Do you think I know we're going to talk about it. Do you think he'll play this week, Heath?
I think he might be as a sort of plonk him in the forward line backup ruck. I think that might be the best option with the loss of Petty in particular.
Play that sort of smash bash, bring it to ground roll, and it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I was amazed. I have to say I was totally amazed that he wasn't selected for the Bombers game. I thought, like we talked about, I thought it was like a safest bet all year was that Heath was going to come back in.
Yeah. But maybe the shoulder problem was a bigger factor than what we understand.
Yeah, for him, well, I just think, as I said before, is that they rolled the dice and said, we're going to just beat – we're the best – we've got the best ruck in the AFL. We're number 2 for stoppages. We're number 2 for clearances. Let's – leverage that against a kid who he got him monstered, that young man, Brian. I mean, Brian's not that, I think he's 24 or something, but God, he just destroyed him.
All right. Alex, no fancy name, says, can we have a bit of a discussion about the Colt? I must admit, last year I was wondering if we'd overhyped him in 2024 and thought he might be a star at Casey, and at best be a bit player when injuries forced his inclusion. On Saturday, he picked up one vote from the ABC, albeit in a crowded field after Cos and Max. And today he scored a couple of coaches' votes. Looking across his career stats, there's not a lot that leaps out, but I do feel that he's making better decisions, shows a fair bit of composure for a third-year player, and combines these attributes with good foot skills. On current form, he's more than a bit player and probably more than a good ordinary player. Your thoughts? So, big man, there's plenty of question marks. There were plenty of question marks surrounding Colt coming into this season. He spent periods in and out of the side last year, and there was a view among some supporters that if his form and perceived attitude issues carried over into 2026, his future at the club could come under some real scrutiny. And we've spoken a number of times on this podcast about our preseason chat with Colt, where he talked about how much he was enjoying working under Stephen King. He spoke about having the confidence to back himself in, play with freedom and not be afraid to make mistakes. And at the time, they were just words that he said to a couple of guys at a table at a player sponsors thing. But over the first 14 games of the season, he's absolutely backed up all of that with his actions. We're seeing a player who's playing with genuine confidence, embracing his role, making better decisions with the ball and bringing some great energy and attitude every week. What once looked like a depth player fighting to establish himself is now looking more and more like a key piece of the team. What have you seen in his game that's allowed him to take a significant step forward this year?
Well, you might remember when we at the beginning of the season and the preview looking forward, he was my player that
on notice.
That the heat was on that needed to step up, and I cannot be more impressed with the way he's stepped up. So to answer your question, I think one of the short version of the question is, number one, he's got super fit, and it's really interesting. Like King again, he's obviously got high EQ, but I saw him at a function, presented a function, King, and he talked about Colt, and he said something that he subsequently said a number of times, reinforced how great an athlete he is. He's a power athlete with a huge tank, is essentially what King was saying. And I say that because I've heard him say that several times, but I think that that's part of King's philosophy, his public praise, private criticism, which is the best way to manage people, bar none. And he publicly praises that aspect and other aspects of Colt's game a lot. And I think Colt strikes me as we all like that sort of feedback and praise. And I think Colt needed that. So I think that's been a factor. I think King's managed him brilliantly. When he was drafted, I was a huge rap on Colt, and so I was disappointed. That was partly why I picked him as my player, that I was needed to take another step or was under pressure. And the thing that I most loved about him in these footage as a junior was his kicking. He was an elite junior kick, and that was why Taylor targeted him. Plus, he was competitive beast, is what King said. Plus, he's a bit of a different cat, and I think all clubs need a bit of a different cat and glue play. But as a junior, particularly under pressure, his kicking was his one wood, and he's got a great technique, and you really see that come out in game time. So I'm not been surprised he's playing at a much higher level. Not surprised at all. I'm really pleased because, for me, it was about his attitude. He needed to get fitter, and he's done that. What I have been surprised about, to be honest, is how strong he is defensively. I said early days when he was trialled, I think when Salo went out, or I forget why he was trialled there, but he was trialled at half-back in one of those pre-season games. I thought that's not going to happen come season. I've been wrong on that. And part of why I didn't think it would happen is because I thought he'd struggle as a lockdown defender because he's so aggressive and he wants to attack all the time, but he's been brilliant as a defender. It's exactly really what we needed defensively. Someone who has done and can lock down sort of gun medium forwards, can get in, good play as he is. He's, been given tasks, he's gone to it. And funnily enough, I think it's actually helped his offensive game to an extent because whilst he's obviously got fewer attacking involvements as a halfback flanker and sort of as a tight defender, the attacking and offensive involvements he have are much higher quality. And he's a beautiful kick. He kicks off one step, 40, 50 metres. He kicks to advantage. He has been awesome this year and has reflected of where he's at. So his career player rating is 6.54. Last year when he was in Struggle Town, which is, why I was concerned about where he was travelling, his rating last year, he played 9 games last season for a player rating of 4.07. That's pretty low. This year, conversely, he's played 14 games. His player rating is almost double that, 8 points, 8 player ratings. And what's really important to note about that player rating is that defenders are disadvantaged under the player rating system because they're less involved in scoring. So that's a really impressive jump for a player who's essentially been a defender for most of the year. Looking at his numbers, he's averaging 17 disposals a game. Disposal efficiency this season's up. It was 71. It was 57.3 in his first season. It was 71.9 in his second. It's 78.8 this year under a much more fluid disposal efficiency, under a much more fluid sort of model. He's up to 5.3 contested possessions this year. He was only 3.3 last year. Uncontested possessions, 3.4 last year. It's 9.4 this year. Really impressive stuff. Last year he didn't even have an average for centre bounce attendances. He's 2.1 this year per game, but he didn't go to any centre bounces last year, and he's done some this year. So really, I've been super impressed with him.
And we also, before you go, George, we also made mention late in the game last week against Collingwood, he had that composure to sort of, rather than blaze away and kick down the line, he found a player sort of to the side and soaked up that extra couple of seconds. He had that forethought and composure to do that, George.
Yeah, he's really progressed this year. I think it's partly because he's found a role in the back line that, previously last year it was a bit of half forward, a bit of wing, a bit of this, a bit of that. He's become Bowie Mark II in the back line. Brilliant kick. Knows now how to defend. He's turned into a real defender, which I've mentioned over the last couple of weeks. But I think he's finally realised that what Bidman was alluding to when he was playing at the lower levels in junior football, he was able to get away with things.
Just with his talent.
With his talent, which he hasn't been able to do when he's playing the same style at senior level. Now he's taken that step upwards and realised you can't get away in the same way that you do at the junior levels, but his underlying skill hasn't disappeared. So we've got, like I said, a Bowie Mark II, and that is just fantastic because we've been screaming out for this small lockdown type defender for a long, long time in the side, and it looks like he's slotted beautifully into that role.
I totally agree, George, and I think couple of things there is, one, not only have we been screaming out for that, but because turnover, like we scored 60 points in this game on turnover in large part because they carved it up off half-back flank. And I said that we got a huge percentage of our scores from midfield turnovers, and that's really the premium ones. You get them, you're going to score more often than if you get your turnovers deep in the half-back flank, which puts a huge premium the other way on half-back flankers who, one, can set up scoring chains like he can and Bowie can, but more importantly, don't turn the ball over at half-back flank. There's that. The other thing that your point is a really good one that I think this is really important is playing half-back flank as opposed to a dynamic sort of half-forward. It's always feast or famine at that half-forward role because, you're dependent on other things, whereas I think it's sort of another example of great man management by King to give him a role, to send him back. And he's really grown into it, and he's been a leader down in the defensive unit where he's, probably wouldn't have been at half forward as high half forward. So, good coaching, but he's obviously had to do the work, and, it's super impressive.
D-Minion writes, let's zoom out for a second because it's easy to lose sight of something pretty remarkable. Cast your mind back to the start of the year. Most of us, if we're being honest, thought this was going to be a painful rebuild. We'd lost key players. The injury list was starting to build, and the expectation was somewhere around the bottom half of the ladder, and yet here we are, 9 wins, sitting fourth, and we haven't even had our bye yet. We've been playing a young list through a brutal schedule, carrying injuries pretty much every week, getting a new injury to a key player every week, and we're still getting the job done. So my question to you guys is, when you actually zoom out and look at the bigger picture, how surprised are you by where we genuinely sit right now, and where do you rate us against the other top teams? And the coach was asked today in his presser if he's surprised about where we sit 14 games into the season, and if he expected to be here, and here is what he had to say.
Cool. Well, top four, do you think you'd be here after 14 games?
No, not really. Saying that, I think it's we all know how marginal this and close this competition is, so I really don't look too much at the ladder. It's more around sort of how we're travelling and how we're evolving, but you know, we've got some big tests coming up, and no bigger one than this week over in Adelaide. So, I think probably speaks for all the work staff and players have put into this point. But there's some quality teams nipping at our heels. So it's we can't really sit back and enjoy it. It's just on to this week and look forward to this one.
What do you put that success down to? There's a lot that's been made of the culture you've been able to instill. How much of a role has that in particular played?
Yeah, I think more the environment and our players and staff just embracing change and seeing the opportunity in it. I've been really fortunate to come in. There's been a bit of change, but we've got some well-established leaders that have achieved great things in this game, and they've been unbelievable for me as a first-time coach to come in and lean on, and then our staff as well, the coaching group that's really united and sort of work really well with each other. So that's been easy to come in and work with those guys. So I think any first-time coach, you're never quite sure how it's going to go, but the way the group's sort of grabbed it and ran with it, it's been really pleasing. And to this point, we want to be a team that challenges the best teams, and again, we want to try and do that this week.
So George, how surprised are you that 14 rounds into the season we're sitting top four? Top six if you factor in our bye to come, and where do you rate us? We have some big tests on either side of the bye, which might answer some of those questions. I've
been utterly surprised by where we sit today. I mean, the fact that we're sitting top four, and most people, and myself included, thought it was going to be bottom six or thereabouts. There's a lot of factors for whatever reason that are just simply astounding. Firstly, I'm convinced that we've had a rebuild this season. There's probably a few more pieces to go. But we've got 15 new players in this side that weren't in the side last year. It's just incredible. I think the West Coast were the next, the players, the team that turned over the second most with 11, but we've had 15 come in. That includes 4 players who weren't even there at the start of the season, and 3 of those 4 players are playing in the firsts, which is just utterly incredible. What's more so is we've got a new coach who's changed the game style or the game plan, whatever we like to call, to what the top 4 teams are playing. It's the way, it's probably bringing in the Geelong intellectual property. We're playing the same essential type of game as what they are. The transition game that gets the ball into the forward line, the running has been incredible. Pre-season, we saw more running pre-season than what we've probably ever seen before, and that's put us in a good stead in terms of the outcomes ultimately. But in order to play that type of game, you've got to have a lot of fit people. We were absolutely stiffed by the AFL in terms of our fixture, which we seem to have overcome. They stopped giving the bottom 6 people, the bottom 6 teams, the more favourable fixture, where everyone was supposed to play each other twice if you finished in the bottom 6 the previous year. So we got stiffed by that, even after the bye, which is going to be very, very difficult. We've got 2 8-game breaks, but we've got 3 6-game breaks, and what happens in the last 2 rounds we don't even know yet. But 3 6-game breaks at the end of the season, so it's just quite amazing. But the other thing that's really struck me has been the step up of a large number of players this season who were marginal on the interchange bench or as the substitute last year, that sort of thing. People like Chandler, Sparrow, Howes, Colton that we've just talked about, Turner and Sharp have all stepped up in a big way. That's a lot of players. Six players who were thereabouts last year, but have suddenly become major factors in the way we're performing. And the other one who's taken a huge step up that everyone forgets about is Cozzy. He was playing bit of forward, occasional bit in the middle. Well, he's playing in midfield all the damn time these days, and that's been a major change to the way that the team overall has played, and certainly his performances have been off the charts. So, yeah, it's really quite amazing. And just to add a little bit of icing to the cake at the start of the season, I think the Suns were flying. We're all worried about what was going to happen to the draft picks that they promised us this year and next. And now we're in the situation where those draft picks are looking particularly good for the next couple of years. So that's just icing on the cake. But the transformation of a team from the list to the coaching to the players themselves has been just dramatic.
I don't think you can underestimate the point you made, George, about the improvement of the players, of not just those players you mentioned, but I think across the board, but in particular the players you mentioned. How much King's got to do with that. Of course, it's difficult to know a fair bit, obviously, one would think, but the players have got to do the work. The players have got to go out and do that stuff. And that's where your improvement always comes from. When teams go up levels, it's those mid-range players that, it's not your maxis. I mean, I totally agree with Cos has gone to another level totally this year, totally. Like for me, he's right up there in the conversation as one of the best players in the AFL. So that probably wasn't the case last year. So you've got that jump, but it's really, like you said, it's the Howes, it's the Colts, it's those mid-range players that are making a huge difference. Am I surprised that I'm surprised we're fourth? I've been saying that the ladder doesn't lie, but it tells a bit of a fib when we're down a bye, doesn't it? So you're right, Andy. There is an asterisk on it. I'm not. So I thought that 6 to 10 was definitely on the cards. So I'm not surprised at that. And I've been. I think our list, as I've been saying for a while, is much stronger than what people give us credit for, and I think we've seen that. But you've still got to perform. It's interesting from here, being as objective as possible. For me, you could mount a case that the only teams below us on the ladder at the moment that are a realistic chance of taking our top 4 spot are the Hawks, Crows and Lions. I'm discounting the Dogs because even though they're on equal points with the Crows and Lions, their percentage is so low, it's almost a game down in of itself. That's 90%, despite winning. Their defence is rubbish. 90% is their percentage. So despite winning eight games, that's terrible. So, but the Crows have got a fantastic run home. They're a huge threat, I think.
Well, I'll read out the next question because it relates to what you're talking about. Doug Remus says, even though we look tired, what I took out of the game was that we are in sync as a playing unit and very confident. Who do you give us more chance of beating Crows in Adelaide or Hawks in Launceston? Last year, 64 points and 109% saw Fremantle finish 6th. If we are to get into the top 6, we're going to have to pinch one of those games and one of the Cats and Suns games. I think we can bank the Tigers, North and Port. Then it'll be up to us where we finish pending the results of Cats, Freos and Dogs at the G. Go D's adds, but why are you basing this on just last year? In the other 23 game seasons, 14 wins at 120% and 13 wins and 107% and change got you 6 spots. I suspect that your bar is too high. So, B-Man, is it too early for us to be plotting our run home and where we finish? Do I need to dust off that ladder predictor, or are we taking it 1 week at a time?
Well, Kingy said 1 week at a time this week. The thing that analysis sort of misses a little bit is what the other teams do with each other, because those top teams have all got to play each other in this run home as well. So, I think the Lions, I'll get to that question of who we're more likely to beat, but the Lions are, they're following much the same pattern as they've done for the last 3 seasons. They're a bit behind, but they've made the last 3 grand finals, and at the same point and they've won 2 of them. At the same point, they're on 32 points at the moment after 14 rounds. In 25, they're on 38 points. after round 14. In 24, they were only on 26 points, and in 23, 36 points. So they're around about where they were in all 3 seasons. So I think they'll rise up. I think the Crows will. They've got such a massive advantage playing their home games at Adelaide Oval. I've actually got big question marks over the Hawks. I just think that they've got, I've got some question marks over them. So I think that if we have a decent run from here in injury, I think we've got their measure. So for me, if looking at the ladder at the moment, the threats to the top 4 are the Crows and the Lions. So I think we're a show of making the top 4, but realistically top 6. Again, I'll say it, and I'll keep saying it all the way to the end of the season, is the critical thing is top 6 now. You've got to finish top 6. You forget it, so that's where my focus is on. Top 6 is almost the same as top 4. But, another way we got 9 more games. 7 of those games are against teams currently below us on the ladder. So, we play Freo and we play the Cats, but we at least play the Cats on our home deck, not at bloody Taxpayer Park. Freo is also on our home deck, where we're undefeated, 8 games.
I saw a good stat with the 8 games. It's the last time we had won 8 games in a row at the G, Harvey Langford was 4 months old.
Really, is that right?
So worked out how old is he? He's 19, so 19 years ago, I guess.
He was probably winning the pill then as well. So, and the other thing is, I reckon we match up super with the Cats bit, because I think King will be absolutely raring at the bit to get a win over Chris Scott. Like he will. So
it's his protege.
We've got a fortress. So top 6 is really well and truly. So the question of who I think we're more likely to beat, the Hawks or the Crows, depends how you look at it. Because it's funny actually, because this week we're playing the Crows after not having had our bye, but they're putting all the eggs in this basket. The way they're talking about it, they're putting a lot of emphasis on this game. They're going there with the belief they can win it, it seems. Then we play the Hawks off a bye, and it's always variable on how teams pull up after a bye.
Travelling again, 2 weeks.
Travel. And that game's also at bloody in Tasmania. Yeah. So I actually rate Crows a better team than the Hawks. Is how. But Crows, we've got a chance. They're not a high transition team. So I'm quietly confident this week.
Let's get into the Casey game. I was just having a look at the weather, what it's like on Saturday, and looks like it's going to rain, but then be sunny.
Light showers.
Yeah, but it looks like game time. It looks like sunny and 13, so it'll be cold. But
let's take that then.
Let's talk about Casey. Casey bounced back strongly from last week's disappointing fade out against Collingwood, celebrating the rich history of the Springvale Scorpions with a convincing 32-point victory over Essendon at Casey Fields. Wearing the traditional Scorpions Guernsey to mark 20 years since the club's rebranding and 30 years since the 1996 Premiership, the Demons produced their most complete performance in several weeks, setting up the win with a dominant first half. Casey raced to a 46-point lead by halftime and never looked seriously threatened, eventually running out 32-point winners, as I mentioned. The story of the day was Matt Jefferson. The key forward was unstoppable early, kicking 5 goals before halftime and helping Casey seize control of the contest. His substitution at the main break only fueled speculation that he could be in line for an AFL recall, particularly with Melbourne facing selection decisions ahead of its trip to Adelaide. While Jefferson provided the goals, Casey's midfield and defence laid the foundation. Jack Henderson was outstanding across 4 quarters, collecting 28 disposals, 9 marks, 6 tackles, 7 clearances, and a goal in a best-on-ground display. Miller Bergman and Luamon Lual provided strong support, while Tom McDonald marshalled the defence superbly with 21 disposals, 9 marks and 8 intercept possessions. The game wasn't always pretty, particularly after halftime, as errors and turnovers increased from both sides. However, Casey's exciting young talent ensured there was still plenty to enjoy. Changuath Giaf provided plenty of dash and creativity with 24 disposals and 9 marks, while Latrell Pickett and Ricky Mentha regularly injected pace and unpredictability into the game. Pickett finished with 15 disposals and a goal, constantly threatening to break the game open. There were encouraging signs from several young players. Kalani Wyatt kicked 2 goals and showcased his athleticism after moving forward, while Xavier Taylor also hit the scoreboard. Mid-season recruit Max Mapley continued his promising start at the club, combining effectively with Max Heath in the ruck. Heath also strengthened his claim for higher honours with 15 hitouts, 4 clearances and a goal. Essendon improved significantly after half-time, lifting its intensity and reducing the margin through the third quarter. However, the damage had already been done. The Bombers managed to narrow the gap but never looked capable of overcoming Casey's commanding half-time advantage. The victory keeps Casey's finals hopes alive, leaving the Demons just 1 game and percentage outside the group, chasing a wildcard position. With the season reaching its midpoint, the win provided timely confidence boost ahead of a challenging road trip to face Williamstown next week. George, you want to take it up there?
There's not much more to add in this. We've already mentioned both Jeffo and Heath were taken off the ground at halftime. T-Mac not much later on, and taking them off the ground unfortunately left the reins in the hands of a whole stack of Casey players who are barely VFL level, simple ball butchers. So it was 45 points up at halftime, and it's no small reason why Essendon came back in this game. Latrell did what he needed to do. He's obviously far above VFL level and showed it at times, so that was good to see. T-Mac did exactly what he was needed to do in the back line. He was just a rock-solid player down there. Henderson got heaps and heaps of the ball at will because there was so little pressure, and he'd certainly be putting his hand up for a selection this week. So Taylor looks more and more at home, which was good to see. Reading the ball, coming out with all the things that we have expected of him. He's becoming far more workman-like in the way that he approaches the game, and he's got a good level of skill. So, it was nice to see him put in another performance that he probably needed to put in, because he had been a little bit disappointing in the first part of the season. So not much more to add to that. The win was great, but the opposition, I think they only had 6 players from their AFL list playing in this game, and the rest of them were essentially blow-ins. So, not much opposition, unfortunately, to get a true gauge of where it's all at.
Really, really pleased to hear you say that Taylor played well, but more about his attitude. Perhaps I'm reading too much into your comments, but it sounded like he's a bit more focused and playing that footy. And it's interesting because I was sort of thinking about him in relation to Colt. I think Colt's a really good role model for him, for someone who is a bit of a lad. And, I feel like Xavier Taylor's a bit of a character too, which is a positive. It's not a negative. And, he's a bit of a character in that classic sense of that phrase. And Colt was too. And I think Colt provides Xavier Taylor a really good example of how someone can, really knuckle down and go to another level. And again, I've said this before, or people might have heard this as well, but because I've heard them say this several times. But at that presentation that King did that I saw earlier in the year, he talked about Matthew Scarlett taking Xavier Taylor under his wing and talking about how long into his career it was before he became an established AFL player, and the difficulty Scarlett had at the beginning of his career adjusting to the demands of footy, and that it's not a linear progression from being a star junior through to being an automatic selection in the one. So I thought that was a really interesting. Again, another good example of man management, getting someone like, Matthew Scarlett to come down and have, he's at the club, I guess, doing that one day a week. But, clever stuff, good stuff.
Let's get into changes. Mostly we've talked about changes already, but there is something. We've got a question just about one player in particular. The Demons have a number of fresh injuries to go with their growing list. Harrison Petty hamstring is out for the next 3 to 4 weeks, and debutant Lucas Cook will miss, now they said, 4 weeks with, I guess it was a fractured cheekbone. And Wiley D asks, I'll be really interested in selection, whether they give the likes of Windsor an extended rest or go all out. And so Windsor, of course, was managed this week with his troublesome toe. The question is, do we rest him up through the bye so he's cherry ripe to go for the back end of the season? So big man followed by George. We've talked about the tools and the replacements. So if there's anything else you want to add, what do you think, Windsor? We should probably rest him through the bye and make sure he's cherry ripe.
Well, that would be my inclination. But George, you said you were at training. How was his movement?
They didn't do any match sim today at training, but he seemed to be moving much freer. Last week, I was pretty sure they actually had some oversized shoes on to protect, bandages or whatever it might have been in the toe. That didn't seem to be the case this week. So it was hard to judge. But my inclination would be if there's any residual sort of question mark around him, that this is a week that gives him a chance to fully recover for that, final stretch towards finals.
Yeah, that seems to be the logic. But I was thinking it'd be a bit of a tell if they select him in terms of their thinking about this game. The way King's talking about it is really interesting. He's really leaning into the challenge. He's
like
really
a final.
Into this. Like a final.
He said the finals atmosphere, so it is sort of like not an elimination final, but it is sort of, it sets us up. Certainly an 8-point game.
Well, it's an 8-point game against a team at the moment's a contender to take our spot in the 4 and definitely a contender for top 6. So it is. So it's really interesting the approach he's taken to this game in terms of not shying away from, we've got to buy the other side of this game. So, by the way, we played another team that hadn't Pies. I didn't realise that the Pies had already had a bye. Someone pointed that out on.
No, the Pies had their bye this week. But they had a bye earlier in the season.
So we played the Giants, who had already had a bye, and they had the bye the week after our game. The same scenario was with the Pies. They'd already had, I forgot they played opening round. So they had the bye this week, which was their second. Yeah. So they'd already had a bye when we played them and had the opportunity to throw everything at us safe in the knowledge that they had a bye, which is now the scenario we've got. We can throw everything at the Crows because we've got the bye, and which seems to be the approach. I think that Latrell will come in. I think that T-Mac will come in. It'll be interesting to see. I think they'll bring Windsor in if he's anywhere close to ready to roll, I reckon.
Jefferson or Moose?
Well, Jefferson will probably come in too. It'll be fascinating to see what they go with. Who's Adelaide's ruckman? What's his?
Sean Wren. That's his name. Who's the other guy? Riley.
Michael McAdam.
McAdam. It's
McAdam. That's not. Who's the guy?
McAndrew. McAndrew.
Yeah. Riley O'Brien. Is he not around anymore?
Yeah. And McAndrew is going to be a seriously good ruckman.
Yeah. So maybe, but I wonder whether maybe they'll just run him head to head against Maxi again. I don't know. I would have thought. Yeah.
But the problem will be Thilthorpe is usually their second backup. Do you really want a Kentfield coming up against someone like that?
Yeah. I mean, it'll be, look, in a way, I think we'll get a sense of what sort of game plan. I'm just reading between the lines. So talking about that question about our forwards, I think we're going to be playing a little bit more of a high transition game to look to exploit that this week because the Crows don't play that way. Let's lean into it, in which case they may not go with Heath because you want more runners in, not less runners. So I think we'll get a real tell into their philosophy about how they'll attack this game from selection. I mean, I guess that's a given. But if they go small, I think we can look forward to a game where we're really looking to push hard and in which case we will get more marks inside 50, which is what people want to see.
It's going to be really, really interesting. I don't think Meltstrom surrounded himself this week with any great kudos.
I'd be dropping him even if, to be honest, I don't think he was.
Which you then ask the question: does that may open the opportunity for Latrell or a Henderson even this week?
Yeah,
there's a whole series of maybes, ifs, both with the smalls and the talls this week. We just got to wait and see what they get run with.
Yeah, so if they go and running, then Melksham comes out really because he doesn't give run. And, I mean, he worked, he tried hard, but, geez, he was rusty in that first quarter.
Yeah.
Frustratingly rusty.
Yeah, it's like running through wet cement, unfortunately. Yeah. It's just, And this is Jake Lever's 200th game.
So, is that right, too? And against his old team.
I wonder if he's going to get booed like he has for the last however many years he's been at the D's, that they just won't let that one go.
absolutely positive.
Doesn't he look in absolutely
He's
ripping physical?
having one of his best years since, I guess, 2021.
Yeah. And it doesn't make a difference. He's carrying that injury obviously through a great proportion of last year, and not having it this year has produced the player that we all know he is.
And great leadership too. Just looking at the weather, Andy, it's actually I'm chosen a weather app that's given me the best result.
Cherry picking the weather.
Sunny periods.
Well, you know what?
Wind is only southeast 13 kilometres. No rain. Wind gust 20. Perfect.
Don't you recall what we were talking about earlier about the rain for this week? So we thought it was going to rain. So anyway, that don't mean anything. Let me just give our preview before you would preview the game. The Demons are back on the road for the 5th time this season, heading to Adelaide Oval for what shapes as one of their biggest tests of the season. Adelaide has quietly put together an impressive campaign after a slow start. The Crows have won 7 of their past 10 matches and arrived full of confidence following a dominant 57-point victory over the Bulldogs. Sitting just outside the top 4, they know a win on Saturday night or Saturday could see them jump straight past Melbourne on the ladder, which is what makes this contest so important. The equation is simple. Win and the Demons head into the bye entrenched in the top 4. Lose and Adelaide take their place with the long-awaited bye finally within reach. Melbourne will be desperate to bank the 4 points before enjoying a well-earned fortnight of rest and recovery. Adelaide Oval, a fellow top 4 contender. There's plenty on the line. Doesn't get much bigger than that for a round 15 clash in June. And Wiley D writes, although our current odds against Adelaide haven't blown out, $2.93, I see us as a very long shot to win and won't be surprised if we have a Freo-type loss against the Crows. They have their tails up and are fit, and I'm wondering if we have reached a critical mass on the injury front as well as young players running on fumes pre-bye. I'm not going to lose sleep if we do lose badly. For me, the season starts again post-bye, and let's make judgment on the team against the Hawks in round 17. So, George, followed by Binman, your preview of the massive clash against the Crows.
This is probably going to be the hardest game for us for the whole season when it all boils down. The Crows are in pretty good form at the moment. Watching them last week demolish the Dogs by nearly 10 goals. You just saw how good they are when they start to get going. Jordan Dawson was just amazing, and this week they'll probably bring back Rankin and Tex and maybe even Butts as well, just to bolster them a little bit more. And our question will be, how do we control Tex, Stilthorpe, and Fogarty down their forward line, our back line? So home ground, yeah, it's going to be a really hard ask for us. It'd be great if we get this. It will be great if we get over them in this game. But yeah, given that they finished top of the ladder last year, I think they're coming into their into the winning phase, particularly as they're getting all these players back. So it'll be really difficult for us. But it'll tell us exactly where we sit.
Much will depend, I think, on where we are fatigue-wise and all of that stuff, which is the unknowable thing in terms of for the bye. I'm really sort of buoyed by the way King's talking about this match, and that might be as much as anything about getting it, the players in the right headspace and whatnot. I think we match up really well against this team. Just looking at their ratings, our overall rating is plus 5.9. Their overall rating is 9.1. It's example of that, like Collingwood, Melbourne. Their defensive rating is plus 7.4. Ours is minus 0.1. But our attack, we're plus 6 and they're 1.7. So it's the classic attack versus defense sort of game. Having said that, our defensive system, as I said, has been much, much better in the last 4 or 5 weeks. In the last 5 games, they're going 3-4-1. We're 3-2 in the last 5 games, 3 wins, 2 losses. In the last 5 games, we're averaging 91.6. They're averaging 98.6. They're only giving up 67.8 points in the last 5 games. Defensively, they've been super, probably arguably the best defensive side in the AFL. We're down to 83.6, which is terrific compared to, it was after 10 rounds, it was 102 or something we were defending. So, I think that I agree with George. It's probably our toughest game this season. An interesting thing about the venue is that surprises me. What do you reckon? We've played 9 games against Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. What do you reckon the win-loss race is for that, Andy? What would you guess?
We've won a couple against them. We won the one where we played the double header gather round against, and then Port or whatever, or vice versa. I know we lost one by 1 point in 2021. I was at that game. And then we'll
so 9 games. What's your guess?
I don't know. We'll probably worse than her. We'll probably won 3, lost 6.
Well.
Or 5-4.
We're the opposite, so we're 1-6.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we're 6-3 our way at Adelaide Oval, including they beat us last year 90-77, but we won the previous 4 in a row against them.
Yeah, there was one where I was overseas one time
in 21. I was amazed, 6-3 at the Adelaide Oval.
We play it well because it's so very similar in size to the MCG.
Precisely.
And we also play it well because we mostly play them there. We have hardly played them at the G. I would love to see how many times we've played them at the G in the last decade.
So not quite a fortress, but, that's
well, remember, Actually, I should have known that because we had quite a good record at Adelaide Oval as well in the last 5, 6, 7 years around our premiership time because we also played those finals up there. So I think we had
for me, the game will come down to that ruck battle and our midfield and our clearances because we're points from stoppages. We're 39.6. They're only 34. That's a big difference. They're a good side, so we're scoring 5 more points from stoppages. And the other thing is, as evidence of what I was saying about us being a territory team, inside 50s, we're averaging 57.7 inside 50s per game. They're only averaging 51.8. That's 6 more inside 50s per game. That speaks to how we play, but it also speaks to, that they're not really a territory team. They're also a low handball meters gained team. They're the one sort of strong team that's bucking that trend of high handball meters gained. Really, it will be a fascinating game. That we're time forward halves 51.5 to 49.3. So, I think much will depend on how fatigued we are. It's a tough game, but it's terrific to think that we're 6-3 overall. Our record, we've played Adelaide 47 times. It's 27 Adelaide's way, 20 Melbourne's way. So let's get another one in our column, just like we got one back from Essendon last week.
Yes, definitely. That's where I'm going to leave it for tonight. Look out for Bin Man Stats Files preview podcast on Friday if you enjoy a deeper dive into the stats in the lead up to the Crows game. And thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was a thank you to C Apples. And as always, your questions and comments are an absolute integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Pew Pew Pew, Pingu, D-Rev, Smurf, Newy Demon, Mandalorian, Lazy, Gone of the Dead, Alex No Fancy Name, D Minion, Doug Reamer, Go D's, Wiley D, Raskability, Demon Eyes, Wilm, Moy, 1947, Old D, and D Future 15. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and Bimman, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you a shout-out on the next show. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!
It's a grand old flag, it's a high-flying flag, it's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue, as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot? The red and the blue. Where the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing this song to you. Should